Okay, these are your Age of Jackson notes, Jacksonian democracy. We're going to do this in two parts. So part one is going to take care of the front of your notes page, and then part two will be done taking care of the back. In the election of 1824, Jackson has quite a few opponents: Henry Clay, John Quincy Adams, John Calhoun, and William Crawford. Jackson wins the popular vote, but he does not receive the electoral vote. According to the Constitution, at that time, if no one person wins a majority of the electoral votes, the House of Representatives is going to choose the president. So the House chooses John Quincy Adams to be our 6th president of the United States. This is done primarily with some help from Henry Clay, who we've discussed at length before. And Henry Clay ends up being nominated and appointed as the Secretary of State for Adams, and Jackson's going to call this the corrupt bargain. That Clay knew that he was going to get this position, and so that's why he steered everyone towards Adams' direction instead of having Jackson win, even though he had received the majority of your popular vote. For the next 4 years, when John Quincy Adams is the president, you're going to start to have a gap in the Democratic-Republican Party. It grows to be wider and wider until the party just about splits into two, and some people in the party are going to support Jackson, and others are going to support Adams. Andrew Jackson's going to claim that he represents the common man. Okay, so he says that Adams is representing people who are already privileged and wealthy, and he's able to really push that when you talk about the fact that John Quincy Adams' father was John Adams, who had been president of the United States, number 2. Okay, so your Democrats are going to come from your supporters of Jackson, and the National Republicans are going to be your supporters of Adams. So again, your wealthy individuals, your more established individuals are siding with your National Republicans, and Jackson is all about the common man. So in the election of 1828, Jackson, feeling that he had basically had the election stolen from him in 1824, runs again, and during his campaign, he's claiming, I represent the common man. So he promises to look out for their interests and not the interests of just the wealthy and just the well-educated. And Jackson's determined to have majority rule regardless of one's education or wealth. This idea that common citizens could have a role to play in government becomes known as Jacksonian democracy. And so he's getting support, again, from your common men, those common citizens. Right, in 1828, Jackson's going to win the election. You have large numbers of Western farmers and workers turning out to vote for Jackson because he's representing the common citizen. And with an overwhelming number of votes, Andrew Jackson becomes the 7th president of the United States and the 1st president from the Democratic Party. Your 1828 election results are shown here on this map. You see that the yellow represents Jackson and the electoral votes that he receives, and then you have the votes from John Quincy Adams in this little tealish green. A lot of this happens because of expanded suffrage. So you no longer, in the majority of your states, have to own property to be able to vote. This leads you to having more men participate in the election. However, women, Native Americans, and African Americans are still not allowed to vote in 1828. Now, a little bit of background of Jackson. After his experience as a young individual during the American Revolution of being held prisoner, he is going to be able to get a little bit of revenge on the British during the War of 1812 when he has a chance to fight on behalf of the United States of America. Jackson's going to be appointed a general in the American Army, and at the Battle of New Orleans, which occurs technically after the War of 1812 is over, we talked about that, Jackson's able to crush the British Army, even though he's very, very much outnumbered, and he becomes known as a national hero. He earns the nickname Old Hickory after a soldier said that he was as tough as a hickory tree. All right, when Jackson, the war hero, has been elected President of the United States, having said that he represented the common man. He is going to invite everyday citizens in the public to attend his inauguration. So thousands of people are there to celebrate, and they turn out for it. And one person writes, all sorts of people from the highest and most polished down to the most vulgar and gross in the nation were there. Your crowd becomes so rowdy that they're breaking glasses, they're grabbing for foods and drinks, and they begin pushing and shoving the crowd and basically force the new president, Andrew Jackson, to flee from the White House for his safety. So the inauguration became a little bit crazy, a little bit of a party. Make sure that you make a note of this since it's not on your notes page, that a lot of your common citizens are going to come out to the inauguration and that it ends up being a little chaotic. Make a note of that. All right, now that Jackson has won this election, and remember that corrupt bargain we talked about, people getting jobs because, you did something for me with Henry Clay and Adams, Jackson's going to do something pretty similar. He's going to fire many of the government officials and replace them with his friends and his supporters. And this is called the spoils system. So the practice of giving government jobs to his political backers, people who backed him in his election, again, is known as the spoils system. In many ways, Jackson is literally spoiling his friends by giving them jobs in the government. Okay, this cartoon you'll see several times depicting Andrew Jackson and the spoils system. It's to the victor, go the spoils. So, hey, I won. I can pretty much do what I want to do in divvying out government jobs. All right, one of the important things, and one of the things that Jackson is really known for in his presidency, is the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears. Some Americans, generally speaking, hoped that Native Americans could adapt to their way of life, and there are some others who believe that natives were uncivilized and they refused to live near them. Okay. Since the 1600s, many of your white settlers have been pushing your Native Americans westward as they took more and more land. By 1820, though, there are still about 100,000 Native Americans that live east of the Mississippi River. What's going on during the early 1800s, as you have these new agricultural inventions and things of that nature occurring, is many people would like to expand their plantations and expand farmland all throughout the United States. However, there are Native American tribes that are in the way. The Cherokee Nation is one of those groups who had really assimilated. They, more than any other southeastern tribe in the United States, had adopted a lot of white culture. The Cherokee had their own constitution. They spoke English. They sent their kids to missionary schools. Some of them owned slaves. Sequoyah, one of your Cherokee, had developed an alphabet for the Cherokee as well. And let me make that correction while we're here. Sorry about that. So they have assimilated in culture and are hoping that this is going to be able to keep their nation safe, allow them to continue to settle where they are, which is pretty much present-day Georgia. Okay. However, in 1828, gold is discovered on the land of the Cherokee. And so that makes this land even more desirable. And more people, there's like a gold rush going into Georgia, try and find gold and become wealthy on this Native American land. In 1830, Jackson's going to pass the Indian Removal Act and require Native Americans to give up their land and relocate west of the Mississippi River. And Jackson's giving them 1 year to leave. It's like, okay, you got to pack your stuff, you got to go. That land's desirable, and it's no place for Native Americans to be while you have people wanting to move into these areas. You're going to have some court cases, Cherokee Nation versus Georgia first, and then Worcester versus Georgia in 1832. Your Cherokee are going to appeal to the Supreme Court when Worcester is suing for his freedom, and Worcester is a missionary who had been living on Cherokee property and was being forced to leave by the state of Georgia, and he's refusing to do so. Chief Justice John Marshall is going to side with the Cherokee and agree to free Worcester and to let them stay in Georgia. However, Andrew Jackson is going to completely ignore the court's ruling, and he's making them move. This is a classic example of a failure of the checks and balances system. Congress supports Jackson. They support the Indian Removal Act and that law, and they take no action against Jackson for not following the Supreme Court's ruling that the Cherokee were allowed to stay on their property. This is going to lead us to what becomes known as the Trail of Tears. So in 1838, you have federal troops that are going to round up over 16,000 Cherokee men, women, and children and force them into camps. Your soldiers are going to give the people about an hour to pack up everything that they own and tell them, hey, you've got to leave. So most of your Cherokee and other groups, because it's not just this group that's going to be forced to move, are going to leave with nothing more than the clothes that are on their backs. So this movement happens over the fall and winter of 1838 to 1839, and they set out on a long journey west to what is present-day Oklahoma. This is a forced march in the cold, the rain, the snow. They don't have proper clothing. They don't have food. A lot of them are growing weak and die. On this journey, it's estimated that over 25% of them are going to die in the process of marching west towards Oklahoma. So this harsh journey of the Cherokee from their homeland to what becomes known as Indian Territory in Oklahoma has become known as the Trail of Tears. So again, your Cherokee located primarily in present-day Georgia, but in surrounding areas as well, and they are going to be forcibly moved into Indian Territory, into what is presently Oklahoma. Okay, we will have an activity in class next time over the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears. Make sure that you have taken all of your notes. You don't have any blanks. You made that notation for the inauguration and are ready for your TBL quiz in class.